Yeah.
Hello, I'm Mr. Yang.
Hey,
Hello.
there we go. I see Lex, Jennifer, Maximilian, Amy Lynn, Hailey, Macy, Dara. Is it Dara or Dara?
Diara.
Dara. See, I got it. Oh, Diara. Sorry, I missed the I. I'm gonna let you all know something. I'm a little myopic. I've got contacts in, but I have to update the description, so my vision's a little, so I missed the I. Well, thank you all for being here and for doing this. It should be a lot of fun. Satan, is that how you pronounce your name?
It's Setan, but you can just say Namdol.
Okay, Namdol it is.
Well, we have around 400 some participants RSVP'd. I know they're floating in right now, but we have about 160 and more are joining. So we can go ahead and get the ball rolling. Andrew, I was telling these students beforehand that this is very much a forum to learn more about you as a candidate. We have a lot of undecided voters who are going to be tuning in. These are some of the best and brightest at schools all across New York City who have questions to ask you. So we'll go ahead and Andrew, if you want to speak a little bit before we go ahead and introduce our first question from Lex.
Yeah, of course. First, how did you all get chosen? How did all this come about?
So this came about when we tweeted the Zoom email address out to encourage students and teachers to reach out to us. So some of these students emailed us hoping to talk to you and bring you to their classrooms. There were teachers tuned in as well. So we figured a good way to kind of kick off our interactions with high school students across the city would be this town hall. A couple of you, I think.
All right, that's how it came about. Well, congrats on taking the initiative. Thank you for reaching out. And I'm glad it worked out. I would prefer it too if I just came individually to your schools and classrooms and we did this like in 2019 fashion. Maybe we get back there. Maybe this will be like a, we'll be through this time by this time next year.
Well, we'll kick it off. Lex, I'd love to introduce. He is a student at Stuyvesant High School. Alexander Lex Lopez is a sophomore at Stuyvesant High School. He's a policy debater on the student
I just want to stop you there, Hillary. It's Stuyvesant.
Stuyvesant. Lex, you should have corrected me in our dry run before this.
Sorry, I should have.
It's okay. And he currently holds the position of Chief of Staff on the Sophomore Caucus. Lex has been a participant in the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth since 2019.
I was a CTY kid over and over, Lex. I did it for like 4 summers. And then I went back to become an RA, which you should totally do. It was like the greatest summer job of all time. Anyway.
Will do.
Which campuses were you at, or was it remote?
Well, the first one was actually on campus. I was at Lancaster, and then I went. Yeah, it's a really good one. And then last year I actually went online. So it was fun. It was very fun.
I'm sorry to geek out, but so for those of you who don't know, CTY is an academic summer program run out of Johns Hopkins, and it was very formative for me because I went and had a great time and met a lot of great people, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day. So anyway, sorry to cut you off. I was very excited.
Please cut me off at any time. Lex, you took advanced computer science and an ethics in the era of a pandemic course, which I found to be really interesting. Lex enjoys cooking, photography, and exploring New York. So Lex, I'll pass it off to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I first want to say thank you to Mr. Andrew Yang, also Miss Hillary Kinney, of course, Miss Shelby Summerfield, and everybody else who helped organize this. It is really exciting to be here, and I thank you all. So I'll start here. From your interviews with the Breakfast Club to your debates on the national stage, you always use this phrase like investing in the people. One of the largest forms of investments, I think, is that parents and guardians make is education. My parents have placed me in private schools, charter schools, a Catholic school, a public school, and now one of the specialized high schools of New York City. The New York City school system is one of the largest, most diverse, and most funded per student. I was lucky enough to go into schools that provided great opportunities. However, unfortunately, many students don't have access to the resources that the DOE provides. So what I want to ask is, I know that you're a numbers guy, so I looked at some of the numbers that the DOE provides on their website, and the rate of which people who are economically disadvantaged that they fail on the state test that the New York City provides was around 60%. And yet the exceeding rate for students who are not economically disadvantaged for all grades from 3 to 8 was about 70%. It's clear that there is some economic advantage that you have. There are changes that need to be done to face the inequalities that are such a large problem in the schooling system. What ways do you think the DOE needs to evolve to face the inequalities and inequities in schools, especially as charter schools like Success Academy grow in size to help meet the challenges of the gaps in racial and economic inequality, specifically shown through every year in the unequal SSSAT results for specialized high schools?
Thank you, Lex. Thank you for the question. I just wanted to thank also all of the students who are here today. Maybe some of them are your friends. They're just here to cheer you on. Maybe some are just here to learn some more about me as a candidate, or get a sense as to what we all can do to help our city. It's such an important question, Lex. And when I was running for president, it is pretty funny to be able to say that, right? When I was running for president, but when I was running for president, one of the studies that really changed my thinking, and I kind of sense this on one level, was that apparently 2/3 of academic outcomes are determined by income, as you're describing, neighborhood, parental time spent with the child, number of words read to the child when they're young, stress levels in the household, nutrition, all of these things that frankly happen outside of your school building. And so when someone shows up to their school building, we expect the teachers to be able to educate everyone and help everyone achieve at a certain level. But the reality is some kids are showing up, very, very much at a disadvantage from day one. And then other kids have been getting a lot of resources, getting a lot of support, have like a very, very pleasant learning environment at home, and the rest of it. And the pandemic has made all of this much, much, much worse. Actually, give me a show of hands. How many of you are in school in person right now? Because I'm not even sure. Raise your hand if you are in school in person. And no one's moving, so I take it none of you are in school. So the data shows that online school works 30 to 70% worse than in-person school. So for those of you who have not been loving online school, you're normal. like online school is generally just not as good as the in-person version. And so you take a system that is trying to remedy inequities that are baked in many cases into like the very fabric of our society, and a lot of that overlaps with certainly money, but also race, and those two things get tied together and hand in hand in New York City and everywhere. And so what we're doing with the DOE and the schools, we can certainly do a better job. Like there is more that the schools can do. I think that we should be investing resources and letting teachers and administrators trying to do what's right for their students without, frankly, abdicating judgment entirely to these high stakes tests. I think that there are a range of factors that can determine where a kid would learn best. I think that investing it all in one data point, like a high stakes test, doesn't take into account other very common sense factors like grades, like teacher recommendations, essays, interviews, interests, neighborhood. So there are a lot of things I would like to do differently in our school system. I get the sense that you all are from excellent high schools. Like Lex, Stuyvesant's obviously an excellent high school. I don't know if you all know this. My wife Evelyn went to Stuyvesant, so obviously I'd have a bias towards that particular school. And as mayor, I'm invested in the specialized high schools for sure. And I want to expand the capacity by opening new specialized high schools and then having more holistic processes. But then we need to focus on all of frankly, the vast majority of other grades, of other neighborhoods. We're paying an inordinate amount of attention to the specialized schools, in part because all the families want their kids to have the best opportunities they can. So I want to invest outside of schools. I want to give the teachers and administrators more ability to serve our kids and do what they think is best. And I want to try to provide more resources to the neighborhoods and communities that that have been neglected and overlooked, where I think we can do the most good. But this is going to be a very challenging year coming up. You're all feeling it. If you show up a year behind, like that's going to be rough. And so it's one reason why today I announced my goal to have 10,000 college graduate tutors doing high dose tutoring for 100,000 students in New York City that have fallen behind. Because like we can't imagine you miss a year, you come back and then it just like starts up and like everyone's like, oh, it's just like, oh, it took a year, like right where we left off. People are going to be all over the map. They're going to be people that are significantly in need. And so like our school system has a ton of work cut out for it really as soon as we reopen. And I know some middle schools are reopening now, which I applaud. I think we should be trying harder to reopen our schools right now based on the data.
Lex, thank you for such a great question. Very fitting that our first question for this panel is regarding education. We're going to pass it off to Amy now. Amy Lynn was born and raised in Manhattan. She is currently a senior in the dental program at Union Square Academy for Health Sciences. She loves hearing about people's life experiences and has aspirations of becoming a clinical psychologist. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Wow, that's incredible, Amy. Did you know my brother is a clinical psychology professor at NYU? Anyway, I mean, this is a true statement, but I mean, most people wouldn't know that or care, but you might because you want to go into this field.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. My question is, what measures do you plan on taking as mayor to ensure New Yorkers feel safe? This is especially in regards to Asians and the racial attacks on them since the COVID-19 outbreak, but also pertains to New Yorkers overall.
Thank you, Amy. It's such an important question. I hosted a town hall with a group of community leaders this past weekend about the rise in anti-Asian violence. To the extent we have numbers, because I want to try and find, like the extent of the problem. Violent crime is up 94% in New York City year over year. So it's across the board. And then the reported anti-Asian hate incidents are up 900%, which is shocking. And I think that a lot of incidents are not being reported, frankly. One of the problems we have to try and bridge is that there's not a lot of experience or trust in law enforcement in the Asian American community. I think a lot of the incidents we hear about are things that happen that wind up on someone's social media feed or someone recorded them. Like a lot of things are happening that no one will ever record, and then like people won't hear about it. So there are multifaceted reasons why both crime is rising and hate crimes are rising. Our city is going through a devastating time. We've lost 700,000 jobs, 27,000 lives. And because people are in such distress, and I'm going to say too, how many of you all ride the subway? Well, now you're not going to school, so it's moot. But like ordinarily you would ride the subway to school. Like subway ridership is down 70%. And a lot of the safety concerns that people feel, it's because not that many people are there. So if you're Asian and you're in like a relatively empty subway car and then there's someone who's like hostile towards you in some way, it's like a very different experience than if you're like in a crowded subway car, then you would never notice the person's hostile towards you. And if they did anything, there are like 10 people around and the rest of it. Specifically for the Asian American community, we need to try and establish greater trust, primarily by investing in officers and resources that are directed specifically to the Asian American community, saying, hey, let us know what's going on, reporting incidents to us. We need to treat these incidents as hate crimes. There was an incident in Flushing recently that was not categorized as a hate crime, and I believe it should have been, to send a very clear message that, we're going to take this very, very seriously. And then we need to invest resources in ways that will help make people see that we're all in this together and that they'll be able to understand what other groups are going through. I'm sure your schools, I hope your schools have programs that introduce you to people from different walks of life. But the city needs that more than ever right now, that like for folks to have a sense that this person may look a little bit different from you, but they're going through the same things as you are. They're struggling like you are. Empathy is harder to come by in a time of such intense suffering. So one thing I think is related to this, I think we need to invest in mental health resources at a very high level. I think some of the hatred and incidents you're talking about are really like related to mental health, and that people's executive functioning is reduced for a number of reasons. And so they have a very negative or even violent impulse. They're more likely to act on it now than they would under other circumstances in different times.
Incredibly important topic, especially now. Thank you so much, Amy, for that question. I'm going to pass it on to Seton Namdol from Forest Hills High School. Seton goes by Namdol to friends, is a Tibetan American human rights activist and a senior at Forest Hills High School in the Academy of Public Service and Chinese Studies. She's the co-president of her Model UN team and is a part of a grassroots organization called Students for a Free Tibet. She is interested in foreign policy, China-America relations, and plans to major in international relations. Thanks so much, Namdol, for joining.
Yes. Hey, everyone. If you hear
Hey,
anything,
Namdol. How are you?
I'm good. If you hear anything in the background, it's probably like my mom cooking or my brother playing his Fortnite games. But besides that, hi, Mr. Andrew Yang. My name is Titha Namdol. Like Hillary said, I'm a Tibetan American activist and a daughter of Tibetan refugees. So because of my ethnic background and being from Queens, I was wondering what you can do as the future mayor to ensure that minorities, refugees, immigrants, etc., have their voices heard. Like Amy said, given the recent rise of anti-Asian hate crime, and especially in New York City, it's really important to address the situation. So for example, would you plan on implementing any programs, or how would you address the situation given the fact that you're also a part of a minority group? And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Namdol. I'm going to speak to like a couple of things that I've observed about being Asian American and living in New York City and then running for mayor. Asian Americans are 14% of the city's population, but we tend to get involved in local politics at a lower level than other communities. And I think the needs in our communities are often not fully recognized. So a couple of things, at least by one measure, the Asian American poverty rate in New York City is 24%, which is among the highest of any communities in New York City. And that's not something people generally associate with our community. And to your point, Namdol, a lot of that poverty is in immigrant communities. Like people are coming in and then they're working in restaurants or very difficult industries. It's very, very hard to make ends meet. So one of my goals, first, I would be very proud to be the first Asian American mayor in New York's history. There have been 109 mayors. Maybe the 110th should be Asian American, the son of immigrants. I think that might be very positive. But then really the way I would deliver for some of the populations you're describing is by, trying to invest public resources. So I'll give you a couple of examples. A few years ago, the city recognized that the health of the immigrant communities was not being well taken care of. So they started 2 neighborhood action centers that would help serve immigrant communities. Neither of them was in Queens, which doesn't make much sense to me personally. Like Queens is the first place I think of when you're looking at trying to support immigrant health. Similarly, the level of resources going to Asian American serving community orgs is much lower than the 14% that I cited. So I think one way that we can make ourselves more visible and less neglected is simply by standing up and saying, look, we're New Yorkers, where we have the same needs as everyone else, and our community should have the same level of recognition and investment. And that certainly includes immigrant communities. As someone who's a son of immigrants myself, and very, very grateful and to my parents. Like many of you, I think, might also be the first generation born in this country. So you grow up, you don't fully realize what your parents went through. You're kind of striving to find your place in this country. I mean, it's very much part of who I am. And I'm going to say it's very much a part of what New York is, or like the community that New York is. Like this is very much a city of immigrants. I would say that I'd never, when I was growing up, I never would have imagined that I'd be in the position I am now. But those opportunities were possible because of this city, and that's what we have to maintain and preserve and pass to you all. See to it that one of you will be running for mayor, and how much older am I than you? Let me think. I'll do some math. You're all about 17. I'm 46, so you will be running in 29 years. If it's the same timeline, it might be different. You might go younger. I actually don't know what the minimum age is for mayoral candidates. Can someone look it up for me? For president, it was 35. I have no idea if there's a minimum for mayor. I actually don't think there is a minimum. So you could run for mayor right now. Excuse me. I'm getting over COVID, so I still got a cough.
We will look into that. When someone's looking up that, we're going to pass it on to our next panelist, Jennifer. Jennifer McKenzie lives in Queens. She is a junior attending Benjamin N. Cardozo High School. She's in Cardozo's college journalism program, taught by the amazing Mrs. Ida Esmail. She's a member of the National Honor Society, and she is interested in building a career in journalism and communications. Jennifer, for joining.
Hi, thank you for having me here, and you guys are all amazing. My question to you, Mr. Yang, is in public schools, students are often taught on a basic one-size-fits-all basis. We're required to take courses that we have no interest in and will have a very limited influence in our long-term life. Public schools used to offer vocational education like home economics, shop class, driver's ed, and so many other fundamental life skills that could be applied to everyday lives. Are you interested in bringing these back to the public school curriculum? For the kids who are interested in trade and practical skills like cosmetology, plumbing, technicians, etc., are you willing to adjust their education so they don't have to wait until college to learn about their interests? Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a great question, and I am 100% aligned and on board. I think that our high schools emphasize rote academics, which you correctly point out, at least some of which are not going to be very useful to you. So one of the things that's happened is that we had a curriculum that was designed in an earlier era. It has not really evolved that much. Meanwhile, society and technology have completely evolved where, like just things are different. Like, for better or for worse, you are going to have one of these in your pocket all the time. So what does that mean in terms of what high school should be teaching you? I certainly think that we have underinvested in and underemphasized vocational, apprenticeship, technical, you named plumbing, cosmetology, and other things, Jennifer. We should be blazing a path for kids that want to head in those directions and destigmatize it completely. Because one of the things right now people are hearing is it's like college, college, college. And many of you are very bright, and I like college. I went to college, and many people should go to college. But we should not be saying college is for everyone. There are people that have different interests, different skills, different proficiencies. And let me be the first to say that there are so many people that are doing things that I could never ever do, like that fall in this category. You know what I mean? Like that, where there are people fixing things around my house. I'm a very not handy person. Like if my wife Evelyn, valued my ability to fix things, this relationship wouldn't have worked. So when something needs to get fixed, we call someone who is a very different skill set. And we're super grateful and appreciative. So if someone has the desire and aptitude for plumbing, construction, farming, I think we should be trying to have more urban farming, really anything under the sun. As someone who studies what the jobs of the future look like, there are a lot of what's called middle skill technical jobs that do not involve computer science degrees. They involve a degree of technical aptitude that it's possible to gain without a 4-year degree. So we should really be driving more people in this direction. And it makes me a bit angry and frustrated that our high schools have not adapted more. I want to follow up too, and I'd love to change that. I mean, I may be in charge of things pretty soon, and so maybe I can make some of these things happen, Jennifer. But I'm actually going to do a poll, and I can see your text responses. So if you're texting, please give me a sense. I just want to throw out a few things that you might actually have an interest in a higher level than some of the stuff we're teaching you now. So let me try this out. Financial literacy. Thumbs up, text, positive psychology and mindfulness. People like that one. Like some people don't like it. One thing that studies have shown really, really positive: art, creativity, like theater, all of those things actually have very high ROI in terms of your engagement level. So those are some of the things I have in mind. I like where you were going though, Jennifer, where the more practical, the better, especially in a world where, again, we're going to have these. So what are the things that these cannot do? You know what I mean? Like if you keep up with me, you know that like I'm very, very concerned about AI. Like AI is going to come along and do certain tasks is better than we're going to do. So we really need to be trying to drive people towards the opportunities of the future. Yeah. So I love your question, Jennifer, and I want to lead in that direction.
Next is Haley Kohlberg. Haley is a senior at University Prep Charter School. She is an e-board member of the Student Government Association, Girls Club, and Literary Magazine Club. Haley is passionate about helping others and enjoys tutoring in many subjects. She has plans to major in aerospace engineering in the fall. Thanks for joining us, Haley.
I just want to say thank you so much to Mr. Yang and of course to Ms. Kinney, because this is an opportunity that I would never assume that I would get. So
awesome, right? Yes.
So I am Afro Dominican and Puerto Rican. So I am a person of color, and I'm also in a school where it's just solely minorities. So my question to you is, what would you do to create a more stable long-term employment opportunities, especially during the pandemic and during the polarity of the country, and a more diverse workplace?
Thank you, Haley. It's something that we have underinvested in and we need to invest more in. I do have some ideas in this direction. So I was with a guy named Edwin Raymond in Brooklyn a few days ago. And Edwin grew up in a tough neighborhood. He's African-American. And then his local shop, which is run by like an Arab family, started employing him in the shop when he was 12 years old. And then he worked there continuously for a while. And then he stayed out of trouble because he said he was too tired from work to get in trouble. And some of his friends, struggled because it was a tough neighborhood. So Edwin's now running for city council. And Edwin says, we should be trying to connect teenagers, high school students, anyone who wants it, with jobs in their communities, and we should subsidize it. The fact is that Edwin, doesn't work in that shop anymore. But he says that the work ethic, the discipline, the camaraderie, the teamwork, it ended up driving him into his career. And so I'm just going to just play this out just because I just love Edwin Raymond and I just want to tell you about him. So Edwin Raymond then, he experienced racism as a, Black youth growing up in Brooklyn. And so he decided to become a cop himself. And then he became a lieutenant. And then he became a whistleblower against some corrupt practices in the NYPD that are detailed in the documentary on Hulu that's called Crime and Punishment, which is free. I totally recommend it. If you're a teacher watching this, check out this documentary and see if you think that your students would benefit from it, because it's so good it actually even warrants class time. But he credits his connection with that shop as pushing him in another direction, Haley. So to your question as to how we can create better opportunities for people of different backgrounds, particularly Black and brown people who are right now marginalized in many of these communities, we just need to connect them directly with opportunities and do it in a way that puts resources behind it. And one of the things I'm very passionate about too is trying to have people of diverse backgrounds start their own businesses. If you look at the rates of business formation around women of color, they're quite high. The problem is that the level of financing they get is quite low. They're disproportionately single employee businesses, sole proprietorships. So I have launched something called a People's Bank that is going to put $100 million into nonprofit fund that's then going to put resources into the hands of community development financial institutions that invest in communities of color. So one of the things that's happening right now is that, and I said this about the vaccination, if you set things up to be equal, the results will be unequal. You know what I mean? Like if I have a vaccination site in different communities, people of color are going to get it at lower levels because they have less time, less resources, less trust, like less proximity, more responsibility. So if you say, hey, we did it, so it's even Steven, like you're going to end up with unequal results. So if you want to try to even it out, you actually have to be very deliberate and invest resources, particularly in connecting people to opportunities. So I'd encourage you all to check out Edwin Raymond, particularly if you live in Brooklyn. But I've learned a lot from him, and we need to invest a lot in that direction. He has an inspirational story.
Thank you for participating. Next panelist is Macy McGrail. Macy's a senior in the drama studio at Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School Music and Art and Performing Arts.
Oh my gosh, that's the
at
Fame
LaGuardia.
School, isn't it? Have I dated myself? Is Fame now too old for anyone to have watched it?
No, it just celebrated its 40th anniversary. So.
See, 40th anniversary. That's how old I am. It came out when I was like 6. Anyway.
At LaGuardia, Macy has performed in 2 all-school musicals, Cinderella and The Sound of Music, produced LaGuardia's all-school talent show, Rising Stars, and served as sophomore class president. Macy's an aspiring actress, no surprise there, and will be attending Boston University School of Theater in the fall. Macy, thank you for joining us.
Wow.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Yang, for hosting this. My question is, what is your plan to revitalize the arts, especially live theater, after the total shutdown due to COVID-19? And what role can young artists play in this effort?
Well, thank you, Macy. It's such a great question. I am passionate about the arts and the culture of New York City. And you could make an economic argument very straightforwardly. Here's the economic argument. 15 million people came to New York for Broadway shows in the last year that they were open, and they supported almost 100,000 jobs. But I would say it's even more compelling than that, because the arts and culture of New York City are what drive all these creative people here. And then the creative workforce is what makes all these companies feel like they need to be here so that they can access that workforce. So it all begins with the arts. And if you look at the numbers, artists have the same impact on a community's economy as entrepreneurs do. So if a group of artists move someplace, the properties get more valuable over time. I don't know how many of you knew that. So Macy, I want to be a mayor that prioritizes the arts, that invests in it. I'm going to be very frank about what's happening right now with Broadway and the rest of it. So Broadway shows have been shut down for at this point, like almost a year. And I talked to the head of the Broadway industry, and I'm happy to say, and this is to the second part of your question, that if you want to try and help folks who are in the theater community in New York, which is what I'm centering on right now, there are other artists, but this is kind of at least top of mind. Their organization is called Save Our Stages, and they've been trying to support various people who've been out of work. Now, Save Our Stages is also the name of a bill that has passed. I mean, this is kind of amazing. That Chuck Schumer, our new Senate Majority Leader, which I helped make happen, but has authorized hundreds of millions of dollars directly to Broadway theaters, where Broadway theaters are now going to have money grants, essentially, saying you can reopen and we will pay your operating expenses for approximately, right now it looks like it's 6 months, and it may go on even longer. So the reality is, if you want to try and support the revival of the arts community, the arts industry in New York City, the biggest source of funds is going to be the government. I approve this use of funds. There's no way that Broadway is going to reopen without this kind of action. And so I'm thrilled that Chuck Schumer is leading the way. And I would like us to take that same principle that we're doing on Broadway to other artistic fields, that might not be getting this kind of funding stream, and to restaurants, because, to me, New York City without its independent restaurants is not going to be New York City either. But given the magnitude of the problem right now, Macy, and the time frame, this is like a public sector intervention scenario. But there are always things individuals can do to help. And the organization I've seen that's trying to help people right now is Save Our Stages.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Macy. I have to say, I was going to say, it's it's awesome that someone like you already knows what you want to do, like in that regard, in the arts. It's a very difficult field, but I know people who've been very, very successful at it. So please do stick with it.
I will. Thank you.
We have about 6 minutes left and 2 questions, so I hate to rush, but I want everyone to know our time.
I've been long-winded. I'm sorry. I was going to try and take some questions from the chat too, but it looks like I messed up. But don't worry, I'll be punctual on Diara and Max.
We'll have more events in the future as well. We'll go to Max next. Max Rodriguez Situ is a senior at Brooklyn Tech. He's currently waiting on his college decisions, so fingers crossed for Max. Due to COVID, Max has especially struggled the past year with his ADHD. Before COVID, he was active in the photography club at Brooklyn Tech. He is a competitive Overwatch player and has captained the Brooklyn Tech high school team. Max, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Andrew. My question was, as someone who's struggled a lot, especially this past year and maybe before a little bit, but not as much as this year, especially with school and having online school and how crap it is, like terribly. I was wondering how you plan to reopen schools and what also any plans as to like keeping, like I found at Tech especially, stuff regarding my 504 was just not done. And if there's anything you plan to do or in that like same sector.
Well, thank you.
It's a 2 question, but
yeah, no, reopening our schools is paramount. I'm a public school parent. My kids have not been in school. I said before, like the data shows, as you said, Max, that online school is not nearly as good. And the data also shows that reopening schools for young children should not pose a public health threat because young children have not been demonstrated to be spreaders of COVID. So we do need to try and resource the teachers. We got to make sure everyone's vaccinated, if they are at risk, because, expecting a teacher to return to the classroom without a vaccine right now, I think, would be unreasonable. We do need to invest in protective equipment. One of the problems is that we've asked schools to do things and we haven't given them the money. So that's not a good situation. But we need to, if we are able to provide the teachers and administrators what they need, we need to get the schools open as quickly as possible. And then we need to expect kids to show up behind. One of the things that we need to try and increase dramatically is the level of mental health resources, guidance counselors, and other resources in the schools. That was true pre-COVID, but post-COVID, it's going to be even more serious. To the second question you had, Max, like 504 is something I'm not familiar with. Is that like
I mean, it's like accommodations from like the state and city.
I think I know what you're talking about then, and I am into it. I'll look into whether they're like we should be improving the existing program. One of my sons is neurologically atypical, so I think he may be getting some of these accommodations as well. And you don't want it to be difficult to administer. You don't want people having to like arm wrestle with the bureaucracy to get what they may need. I really dislike bureaucracies that you can't get the answers you need, like you never get back to you, and like the rest of it. One of my main goals is to make our government and public sector just more responsive and human. It's like, because I think it's wrong when people feel like they don't matter to their government. I mean, in theory, you all are our bosses, especially you all, because you're going to be here forever. You'll be our bosses for like, decades. Hopefully you all come, make it happen in New York City. You can leave New York City for college. But then after that, please do come back.
Thank you, Max. All right, we're rounding out her.
Diara's name. It's Diara, right?
Diara.
I think I got it right. It's more of like a long A. Let's get it from her.
Yes, Diara.
Diara, I guess you were right then, Hillary.
Yeah, Diara is a senior at the Young Women's Leadership School of the Bronx. She's a student activist interested in majoring in political science with a deep interest in political liberation through economic independence. Thank you, Diara.
Me too. I'm also for political liberation through economic independence.
Yes. So first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm from the South Bronx, which is an extremely underserved
I was just there today.
Yeah. Well, then you should know that it's a very underserved community, and
My question is, how do your proposals deepen economic power, stability, and growth in communities of color while resisting negative impacts of gentrification? Because oftentimes when we hear about, you know, when we hear about like making a poor community wealthier, the first thing that we do is gentrify it. So how can we do that without the negative impacts of it?
Thank you, Diara. I'm happy to share that. This is essentially like the central tenet of my campaign. So you're right that a lot of the way that communities get investment right now is through real estate, and then they get priced out, and then it's like, wait, you know, the place got nicer, but like, you know, like I don't have a place to live. So I've got a very different approach, and my approach consists of, number one, putting buying power into the hands directly of the New Yorkers who are struggling the most. So I've declared a cash relief intervention of $1 billion a year that's going to go to the 500,000 poorest New Yorkers. And it's going to be cash or a cash equivalent that you can use to buy things at local businesses. And so that's to me like an instant improvement. But then if you look up, you say, wait a minute, 29% of New Yorkers don't have high-speed internet at home. And those households are disproportionately Black and brown and impoverished communities, and, you know, like higher density in the Bronx. So then you have to try to get everyone high-speed internet that wants it at an affordable level. And so I've already declared a $100 million commitment on the part of New York City that I believe I can triple or quadruple with corporate commitments on the part of, frankly, the internet service providers that right now already get billion-dollar franchises in New York City. I mean, think about it. If you're like, hey, I'm, you know, like I always forget, they keep changing their names. Hey, I'm Spectrum, and I'm making like $800 million in New York City. It's like, you want to wire those households? And it's like, oh, I don't think I can make money on that. You're like, are you kidding me? Like, how about you wire them? We make it so you don't, like, you know, completely take a bath, but you're not going to make anything either. And we're going to put some money up. So we put some money up. They put some money up. The customers put up a little money because, you know, like they should have some skin in the game. And then philanthropy put some money up, and we try and get the internet speeds up for that 29%. And then the third thing, which is also overlapping with this, is 12% of New Yorkers don't have bank accounts. And if you don't have a bank account, then you spend hundreds of dollars a year you don't have on check cashers, money lenders, pawn shops. And this is another form of exploitation of folks who are disproportionately Black and brown, and in places like the Bronx. So I've already committed to reducing the unbanked and underbanked population in New York City dramatically by opening the People's Bank of New York that I referenced earlier. That's going to have safe bank accounts and a stamp of approval so that both CDFIs and traditional banks can get people into the financial system in a way that just reduces their costs. And particularly right now, if you're undocumented, you're scared to go into a bank because you're like, oh no, like they're going to figure out this, like problematic. Like they've never dreamed of going into these institutions. So we have to let them know that, look, ID NYC, doesn't matter what your status is, you can open a bank account, you have nothing to worry about. And I dare say having me as mayor is going to make people feel like New York City is looking out for undocumented immigrants, I think. You know what I mean? Like this, like just had like Mayor Yang and be like, yeah, he's probably cool with us. You know what I mean? Like, I think I can increase the trust level. So those are some things, Diara, that I want to do to help alleviate some of the inequities that will not result in some of the effects that past efforts have.
Thank you, Diara. Thanks for that question. We are hitting our wrap time. Thank you all for participating. Andrew, if you want to say any last thing, but we're supposed to wrap now.
Of course. Well, this was delightful. I want to give a special shout out to the people who are not on the screen who decided to attend, either to support your friends or just to learn something, get edified. Really, like, you know, I'm running for mayor to try and help everyone in our great city, but I have a special passion for helping young people. I think we have left you an awful mess. We need you to help clean it up. I apologize. I had very little to do with it. I just got here, but it's an awful mess. Like, we owe you better, but we are going to need your help. So certainly do find a way that you can get involved, either with a local nonprofit. Our campaign right now is taking volunteers to help get vaccination info out to New Yorkers, if that's something you'd like to do. But let's help get New York City back on its feet. We can do it. This is the greatest city in the world. But we certainly are going to have to participate. And I thank you all for participating today, and all the panelists for asking such spectacular questions. Your futures are very bright. I can say that with a lot of confidence because, you know, like, I spent time with a lot of folks, and you all are stellar. You're going to go places.
Panelists, I'll be in touch with you all. Thank you all to the attendees tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Let's go, New York City. Let's get our city back. Thank you all.